Welcome back to our Teach About AI series. I'm Mrs. Cannikins. Our goal is to empower teachers to have great talking points and great lessons available, lesson ideas, so that when the topic of AI comes up with students, you can either teach this simple lesson with a play and pause format and let us do the teaching, or as a teacher, you can watch this lesson ahead of time and deliver it when the time is right. So hopefully you'll get some ideas and some knowledge to deliver talking points about this topic to your students. This time, our talking point is about AI and how AI, we call it hallucinates, or AI has misinformation. AI is often wrong. And so we want to remind teachers of that, but certainly we need to teach students that and some ways to identify that and then to work around that. So we have some fun ideas and ways that you might be able to address this topic with your students. So this is part of a series. We've done other lessons on AI and bias, how AI is unimaginative. We'll be looking at plagiarism, safety, potential loss of skills, why it doesn't pay to cheat with AI, lots of things to talk about. So about AI, as we talk about misinformation, we need to know that sometimes, often in the AI world, we're hearing generative AI being described as hallucinating. And so, what is a hallucination when it comes to generative AI? Well, that's when AI usually very confidently produces or provides material as fact that it is actually made up. It may provide accurate or even nonsensical information or nonsensical outputs, and those would be called hallucinations. Now, the thing that we need to remember is AI is a probability machine. It's not a thinking machine. And so when it's creating what looks like great information for us, it's really just guessing at what is most likely to come next. When it doesn't guess right, that's a hallucination. There's some common causes of that happening. Sometimes it is a cause of inaccurate data to start with. We've talked about bias and how it's trained on everything from the internet, and that bias training can lead to bias outputs. Sometimes it's just missing context. Maybe it's a poor prompt, or maybe it doesn't have the full access to the information that it needs, or sometimes related to that, it might be from an obscure topic. If your topic is very popular, let's say a popular novel or a popular character from history where there's oodles of information on the internet, it will have more to draw from. But if it's a more obscure topic and there's little data available, it's going to have to do more guessing. And sometimes it just goes off script. It misinterprets prompts or it misinterprets instructions and it comes up with something that's totally not right. In that case, you don't have to worry about offending AI. Don't use it. Start over again. So let's look at some examples of what this can look like. So here is an example where I had done some research. I'd used it for some research with a blog that I was writing. And at the end, I'm like, well, there's lots of statistics and facts in here. I better get some citations. So I asked ChatGPT for some sources, and it says, well, actually, I'm just guessing. I'm taking my best information and I'm putting it together and I'm guessing. And that was fairly early on. And so its cutoff training was September 21st or September 2021. And so what we need to know is that if you ask AI for links, it will give you links, URLs that look real. And you must check them. You must make sure that they go to the source that they say. Often they're fake, often they're phony. So do check that. It can depend on the tool that you're using, but know that generative AI can fake you out there. Here's some other examples of misinformation. And on the right-hand side, right above me, it's an example of a popular case in Canada that you might have heard about where there's a chatbot that Air Canada was using, and it basically made up fake policies that it gave to a customer. And it happened to be about a bereavement case. And so that was big news. Now, if you look at this image over here, this is an image generator. And right now, it's the spring of 2024. Image generators are still having trouble with lots of things, often with humans, appendages, legs, arms, feet. If you have animals or people, they'll have too many fingers or claws or toes, or they'll be missing legs or those types of things. And so it often doesn't get it right. In this particular case, if we take what we know about our Canadian Indigenous groups, we have an Inuit female, but it's asked for an igloo. And what we would know as Canadians is that the housing, the shelter that it produced behind there is a kind of a version of a teepee, um, and one that would be very difficult to create in the north without trees and sticks and branches that appear in that teepee structure. So um, there again, it's guessing, and it's using, like a teepee structure in the north, putting a little snow on it, thinking that's going to be good. That is a really good example of a hallucination and in an image. Here's some more. The blackest text from ChatGPT. I was asking it to write a sonnet about characters from a novel called The Cellist of Sarajevo. And, when it spits out poetry, it looks great, but you have to double check. It was calling the narrator a he, and the narrator is really a she. And one of the characters, Dragon, he's an elderly baker. He is not the famous cellist of Sarajevo, and the poem got it mixed up. So you have to read carefully. If you look above, this is a quiz that was generated from an AI source, and teachers' quizzes are probably some of the worst places to find hallucinations. It's about Charlotte's Web, and it asks, who are Wilbur's friends? And you'll notice here that it said Mr. Zuckerman was a friend, but Fern wasn't. And we know that those should be switched. So just false. Another story about ChatGPT that you might have heard about already. A mayor in Australia, ChatGPT falsely claimed that he had been found guilty in a bribery case from the 1990s. So it was writing an article and it stated this as fact. In reality, he was involved in the case, but he wasn't the crook. He wasn't the one who was involved in the bribery. He was actually the whistleblower, the person who was brave enough to call that out. And so often when we see hallucinations, it's adjacent information, just like in the Charlotte's Web and the Cellist of Sarajevo novel example. It's close, it's got the right people, but it doesn't always use them in the right ways. So those are some of the misinformation or hallucinations that we often see. So what do we do when we need to help students and ourselves learn about misinformation and hallucinations? First of all, almost every tool that you use and that students will eventually use will have a warning. And I've got some of those highlighted in yellow. Most tools will say, hey, we can make mistakes. It's important to check. It's your job to check. Review content for accuracy. Every tool will right now give that warning. And as teachers, it's important that you are not just like click, click, click through like we often do, but it's important that we always stop and talk with students when we get that reminder. Another thing, and I can't believe we haven't talked about this directly in our series yet, is the 80-20 rule. That should be the first thing that you think about when you're looking at AI at all. And so we know that we can let AI do some of the work for us, maybe even 80%, but we have to put 20% of the work in to check for those misinformations and hallucinations. And so we want to then normalize skepticism. We want to assume that 20% of the work is still to be done when we use AI. And so we want to normalize that you don't just prompt and paste and go, that you have to do some work. So as a teacher, you might keep a collection of AI inaccuracies, just like I've done in some of the examples above, and keep those, use them for training, use those as examples. Students need to see what AI hallucinations look like. Without seeing, they just don't get it. So show those examples. You also might take a topic that you're going to do and run a bunch of different prompts, and then have groups of students look at those generated articles or those generated stories, whatever you're having them work on, and then have the students look for inaccuracies or even oddities in the AI generated work. Or it's quite fun to do that in images. What if you look close, what's not quite right there? What else can we do? Well, like we were just talking about, checking. And we want to teach our students and have this in our own heart as a rule as well, that if something is beyond general knowledge, if there's a specific claim, or something specific, we should always check that. And it is the user's responsibility to determine accuracy. And so, some places you really want to shine a light when something is presented as a fact, especially when something is presented as a statistic. Can you find other sites, more than one, that support that statistic? A quote, I've often found in literature sources that it will attribute a quote to a character, and it's often made up. So if you're seeing quotes, direct quotes from a character having to do with a novel or a story, make sure you check those against another source. And often, like we talked about before that kind of adjacent material, claims about characters or historical figures, those can often be close but have inaccuracies. And so, really, you want to check those out. If you haven't yet, you might want to try perplexity.ai. This is similar tool to ChatGPT in that it produces results, but it's great for student use because it doesn't require students to log in. It does a live web search, and then it provides citations and sources of what it's used. If you want it to regenerate without a certain source, you can delete a source and it will regenerate. And because of the sources that it provides, there's a lower risk of hallucination and errors. And so, in this next activity here, you might want to try this one. And this will be what we stop and take a look at today. This is a great example of how we can start to get students to read laterally. And that's a great strategy for addressing hallucinations and misinformation. In this case, you want to search or give the prompt, which 5 countries have the highest life expectancy? And likely you are going to have many different answers, like I have in these different screenshots. The bottom black one is Gemini. You can see ChatGPT. The bottom white one is from Perplexity. And the one that I'm right on top of here is from Copilot. And you'll see there's some similarities, but they all have differences. And so if sources are provided, it's important to look at the sources and determine which sources do we trust. So now it's your turn with your class. Let's practice some of that lateral reading. Teacher, if you ahead of time can put that prompt into ChatGPT and Gemini, Copilot, other Claude, maybe other generators that you have access to, take those and paste them into a doc and then share that doc with students. And then students can use the information and the web and the sites, maybe citations provided, but also the whole internet to try to determine which source is the most most reliable. So what would your list of the top 5 be when you practice that lateral reading? So pause the video right here and come back and we'll wrap up. All right. So, what did you find? Which were the top 5? Um, it depends even on the year. The screenshots that I had a couple slides back, those were from the very end of 2023. It's now early 2024. And so my information even changes as we go along. So, thank you for learning about hallucinations and misinformation with us. Remember, check, read laterally, 80-20 rule. Here's some more topics that we'll deal with coming up. We're going to have safety and privacy, plagiarism, copyright issues still to come, and there's some of the topics that we've already covered. So that's it for this time. See you next time on About AI.